Positive Roots, and we have a special guest with us, Samantha McKAY from Positive Roots Consultancy. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Please tell us about yourself first.
Okay, so I am Samantha McKAY and I was born in Hackney in the 1970s, the early part of the 70s. So I was born and bred in Hackney, a really diverse community. Grew up with lots and lots of different ethnicities, so learnt lots about different cultures. But most importantly, what my parents always made sure that we were encouraged to do was to actually associate with people from different ethnic backgrounds and different cultures. That gave us an appreciation not just of the different ethnicities and the different cultures, but also gave us an understanding of how to be tolerant and how to live with people that might be different to ourselves. So it wasn't just about the ethnicities as well, it was also about their abilities. So we had friends that were of all different types of physical abilities and mental abilities as well. So growing up around mental illness or knowing people that suffer from mental illness is something that we've always grown up with. So it wasn't anything for us to sort of stop, stare at or be curious about or to be able to treat those people with any difference. They were people just like everybody else, but just had different challenges. So yeah.
And tell us also about your family and your background.
Okay, so I am one of 7. I'm the youngest of 7 siblings. My parents come from the West Indies, a place called Dominica. Both of them are from the same village. And of my 6 siblings, I have 1 brother and 5 sisters. As I said, I'm the youngest. The 4 eldest of my sibling group were born and bred in the West Indies, and myself and my other 2 sisters were born in the UK. There is a massive gap between myself and my elder siblings, particularly the ones that were born in the West Indies. But in terms of being a whole unit, we're quite a unified bunch in terms of the fact that just because we have got that age gap between us, there is no difference in relation to the way that we communicate and converse with one another. My father and my mother, when they came to this country, they were tailors. So my mum and dad used to make coats, and in the family home, we had quite a large home in Hackney, and at the bottom of our house we had quite a large basement. So when we were quite young, my parents used to hire staff, and they made a factory downstairs with industrial machines and sewing machines, overlockers and pressers, and my parents would make coats. As we grew older, we got roped into the family business, so every single one of us knows how to sew. I can't say it's a passion of mine, but it's something that's useful, and it wasn't a career that I wanted to go into because it wasn't something that it was something that I had to do rather than something that I ventured on my own volition. So that was our background in terms of our parents, and our parents were quite strict. Coming from the West Indies, education was very important. Children were supposed to be seen and not heard. So all of the old things that traditional Afro-Caribbean families would adhere to was how we were actually brought up. It's amazing because as you grow older and you have your own children, the fact that I was born in this country as well, the culture I identified most with, or what I knew, was obviously the British culture, because I didn't actually go back to the West Indies until I was 18, so that was the first time I actually saw the country that my parents came from. Was when I was 18, that was in Dominica. And so you're sort of conflicted, aren't you, because you know you're different, especially living in the UK. Growing up in the 70s, there was a lot of racism. We grew up with in close proximity to the National Front, and so we had to deal with all of those sort of issues from a very young age. And when you grow a bit older and you start having your own children, because you've lived in this culture and you've gone to school in this country, you get to know a bit more about what is good parenting and what's not so good parenting. And I'm not saying that the parenting that I received from my parents was bad. It wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't detrimental to me. It's made me the person that that I am today, and it's given me the insight and the ability to be able to reflect on what was good about my experiences of being parented and what I wanted to take forward with my own children.
So taking that context and what has informed you in your formative years, your upbringing and your education, how did that lead you into becoming you were a social worker? I want to know how that informed your decision or how you became...
Okay, well actually the social work is an adage. That's not actually my main career. I'm a qualified criminologist first and foremost, and I graduated from the University of Luton, so I got into this work pretty late. Growing up in Hackney, going to school, particularly during that time, the 70s and the 80s, there was a lot of institutional racism, and I carried a lot of anger. And that anger that I carried was about injustice, really. Injustice towards me within the educational system, injustice towards my peers, you know, or who are also of Afro-Caribbean background, who didn't necessarily struggle at school, but had to work twice as hard as our white counterparts in order to make sure that we came out of school with something. And then there's also the local issues that you might also get from some of the residents. As I said, we lived in quite close proximity to the National Front, so there was quite a few clashes around that. You had to be aware about how to carry yourself, knowing what risks were, what areas you could go into that were safe, what areas you couldn't go into.
These are the times. I mean, I came over in '87, and when you're talking with different people, news and a lot of footage, I remember, you know, things like young boys and girls murders, you know, of NF and skinheads and things like that. No kind of repercussions or accountability from the police on the surface.
Absolutely.
You know, these are the times of a lot of deep-seated hatred and fear. So I can, just to give our viewers context.
So for me, it was growing up in that environment where you experienced disadvantage yourself, maybe on a low level, but on a global level, in terms of community-wide, you saw a lot more disadvantage and a lot more, you know, disparity between what people had and what people didn't have. And to me, I felt that everybody deserves the opportunity to be successful. And if that means that we have to support each other in achieving that goal, then that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fight injustice in the only way that I knew how, and that was by working with individuals and empowering them.
Okay. So, what's it called? You wanted to... It's great. You can have that courage of the conviction to be an instrument of change. So, how did that manifest? Again,
because injustice was my big thing, I wanted to do something where I could combat that injustice. So I thought about lots of things. When I was a lot younger, I had notions of becoming a police officer. I've said it. But yes, I wanted to become a police officer so that I thought that was the only way that I could look at addressing issues around injustice. But obviously growing up in Hackney, going through the 80s, we had all of the riots as a result of the way that the police were so-called police in their communities, and particularly in relation to the institutional racism that was suffered by a lot of our black community members. That put me off of going into the police force. So then I decided that I might want to train to become a lawyer until I went to the West Indies. And then when I got to the West Indies and I was speaking to my grandmother about what it was that I wanted to do, and she said, "Oh, so you want to become a lawyer?" And I thought about that. And that meant, obviously, in some situations, you're going to have to defend people that you might... That then made me think about my value base and how that would make me feel, compromising that value base. And so I decided that that wasn't for me. So really, truly, I didn't really know how I was going to get to do what I wanted to do, but I knew I was going to do something in relation to injustice. So my circumstances were that later on, I met somebody, and that relationship was quite violent. So there was a lot of domestic violence, and I had my first 2 children was with my first partner. As a result of the domestic violence, I tried everything. I tried, you know, reporting to the police. I tried taking to court and doing civil matters, trying to do anything to prevent it from happening. And I took out injunctions. It got to the stage that even the bailiffs that were there to serve the injunctions was frightened of him, so that wasn't even getting executed properly. So I knew then that in order for me to have a life and escape this, that I needed to flee. So I just left one day. I just packed up the car, put the 2 kids in there, whatever I could fit in the car I took, and hey presto, I moved to Bedfordshire, and I went into a women's refuge for 6 months. And it sounds like a sad story, but that was the beginning of the rest of my life. And I don't regret any of the experiences that I had before, including the experiences that I had in relation to the domestic violence. So I don't necessarily see things that happen to me as negative. I try to observe and find out and identify the positive aspects and things that's going to help me move on, succeed, and reach my full potential. So coming to Luton, I decided that with the children, I needed to make sure, now that I was definitely on my own, that I needed to make sure that I had a secure base for them in terms of a house and also in terms of financial security. But what was also important for me was, again, that thing that I inherited from my parents, the value of education. And I knew that if I was going to make any type of career for myself, I had to do it then in order for me to be available to support my children through their own education when they got to high school. So I made sure that I timed it well, went back to university, didn't know what I wanted to do, saw this criminology course, looked into it and thought, give it a go. And I haven't looked back since. And from doing the degree at the university, the first year of that degree programme, I spoke to one of my lecturers and I asked if I could get some work experience in Bedford Prison. It was only supposed to be for 2 weeks. I stayed a year.
A year?
I stayed a year.
What? I mean, okay, let's take it back. First of all, you're right. I mean, it could have been a tragedy, but your bravery, your spirit guide, it's disarming to hear that something that could, you know, what's it called? Set
people back.
Set people back. You actually, took it in a stride, which is, you know, a major thing. And this is interesting to know because it's rare to have a professional who's working in the sector you're going to tell us more about and give us insight to with that first-hand experience. So, first of all, I wanted to know in terms of criminology. Way over my head.
Okay.
Did you know what it was when you read the prospectus and the details? Was it different to what you expected? Better, worse, challenging?
It was better. I don't know what I was expecting. I knew I would be looking at the studying crime, so it's how crime manifests itself. So you're looking at the causes of crime, but also looking at ways of how crime's been controlled. So you'd look at things like legislation. You'd look at the police force. Look at their history as well. You'd look at who the decision makers are. You'd look at statistics. So the criminology is a discipline that's formed out of other disciplines that we're well familiar with. So sociology has a bit, social sciences has an element within there as well, and also psychology. And I like people. So studying people and doing the criminology and having that element of the psychology in there has been really fantastic. And it's been helpful to the work that you're doing because everybody is a unique individual. So what works for one is not necessarily going to work for another person. So it's about using the resources that's available to the people that I work with, and that's how I approach the work that I do. But the criminology side of it was good because it's not any one discipline. You're dipping in and out of a range of different disciplines, and it's quite new. So even when I finished the degree programme, I didn't know what I could do with it. And I remember seeking some sort of careers advice from a careers advisor, and it was very new to them, so they couldn't even suggest what work was available. So I remember coming towards the end of the degree, and I think to myself, well, I'm going to have to find a job somewhere because everybody was talking about the jobs that they were applying for, and so I decided to get The Guardian, opened it up, and the page that I opened it up to was a youth offending service position as a case manager in North West London. And I applied for it. Not applied for it on the basis that I was going to make an application. I applied to get the application form to see what the job sort of entailed, because I didn't know what a youth offending service was, and I didn't know what case management was, having come from university. So I applied, got the job description, and I thought, well, I didn't see anything else that I fancied. I applied for it, got the job, and I stayed in that position. I stayed with that particular local authority for 8 years.
Okay.
And it was whilst I was working for them that I had a fantastic line manager, and she pushed me and pushed me and pushed me to go forward and do the social work degree. I had no desires of being a social worker, considering the bad press that social workers have, and my notions of social work, particularly in children's social care, is about the removal of children and child protection, things that didn't quite sit well with me. But she encouraged me to go forward with it and do it, and I did do the degree course. And to be quite honest, that was the best advice that she actually gave me, because it complements the criminology, and also what it does, it gives me that extra, the training that you get as a social worker is invaluable. It's a transferable skill. So therefore that means that the stuff that I learned in criminology, as well as part of the social work course, I could actually merge it together and actually form the company, which is what I did.
Perfect. Now, before you tell us more about Positive Roots Consultancy, there's things I have assumptions on. There's first-hand experience I know about it, and we welcome questions from you guys, or insights if you work in the public or private sectors. Insights welcome, please. So, my thing is, I'm going to say straight out, is from experience. Public services, there's the individuals like us, or whichever sector you go into, you want to help people, like you say. You want to be an instrument for change, for injustice. Now, in any sector, we know every job, all jobs are hard. No one knows what everyone does. There are some people who are slackers, there are people who bring the reputations down of public services, any kind of institution. We know there's individuals, whether they are police officers, whether they're social workers, teachers, all of these different sectors, we know that. Politics even. We've all met different people who are trying their best against the system, the adversity, the majority, or they have to compromise on different things. My naivety is, when I hear social care, when I hear child protective, services, when I hear things like the legal system, all these things, I assumed it was about care, caregiving, safeguarding, protecting and serving, for the individuals, right. Now, meeting people at the front line in all of these sectors, I will not name names, but they've been given insights. They are people who are working against the grain and isolated in, like professional services and the police, against stop and search, the social workers, the workload, the cuts in services, these kind of things goes against. We don't hear about why there's dysfunction. The reason why I welcomed you and to talk more about Positive Roots Consultancy is to help us understand the disconnect. And because you have insights into both. So please start by telling us about what is Positive Roots Consultancy and why did you start it?
Okay, because I worked for the local authority, and obviously whilst I was doing the social work training, I had the opportunity to have a few placements within some social care departments. So looked after children being one of them, referral and assessment being another. But I also made sure that in terms, because it's my learning, and what I wanted to do with it in terms of supporting people in a positive and effective way, because that's the key. It's about efficiency and how effective we are in supporting people. I needed to make sure that I also had other exposure in social care. So instead of just working for or doing the placements for the local authority, I insisted on getting a placement with CAFCAS, which is the Child and Children and Families Assessment Centre. So what they do is that they are part of the government, but they are a specialist child protection agency to a certain degree. Now, they do private law and they do public law. The public law side of it would be the removal of children that might have to be put up for adoption and supporting local authority to get those children placed in long-term care, or private law. Now, private law is when individuals are separating and there's decisions that need to be made about the children's residency or contact with the parent that's been estranged. Now, that was the area that I was more interested in, was in the private law side of it. So doing my placement with them, I undertook a lot of work around the private law side of things, and that also included going to court and doing reconciliation work. So before the two parties that were parting ways present before the judge to thrash out what was going to happen with the children, I would do reconciliation work with them to help them to come up with a plan and an agreement that could be placed before the judge. So it's empowering those families to make decisions about their family and their children without thinking that they have to have the need to go before the judge to do that. And was quite successful in doing that. Simply, I think, again, because of my background and because of my previous experiences. What was also important for me, and has been and continues to be important for me, is that even though I've divulged quite a lot about my personal background and the situations that I've been in, these are not things that I use to discuss with the clients that I'm working with, simply because it's not going to help them out of the situation that they're in. In some situations, it might even make their situation worse, or their experiences worse, because they might be thinking, okay, I've survived domestic violence, but they might be in that part of their cycle where they're feeling absolute and utter hopelessness. So it's important that, whilst I've shared with you, it's important for me to tell the community that that's not something that I would willingly divulge to people that I'm working with. When I'm working with individuals or families, it's about them. They are the priority, they are the focus, and not myself. I am the vehicle and the vessel to help them achieve the outcomes and the objectives that they want for themselves and for their families.
I understand that, but that must be a delicate balance, because on the one hand, I'm thinking, if someone is in the same DV situation, you get their trust easier, or at the same time, when you're up to here with so much information and so much going on, I suppose there's not room for somebody else's.
Yeah, but it's all about the style and approach. So with me, I might undertake an assessment. You wouldn't necessarily know I'm assessing you because of the way that the questions are being asked. The questions are not being asked where I'm asking you a question and waiting for you to give me a response. I ask the questions for you to provoke you to ask questions of yourself. Does that make sense? So it's a bit more like life coaching, because we all have the answers within us. We just need somebody to support us in tapping out what we need to use and what tools we need to use to address that particular situation. But it's also about how it makes you feel after the event. And that's the bit that I'm interested in. If I can empower somebody through a critical or a crisis point in their life, that means then that if they've been empowered as a result of that, they will go on to resolve a lot more issues and conflicts that they may be experiencing, and they will have the tools and the know-how to be able to do that. So Positive Roots was sort of founded by the fact that I didn't like the way that local authorities were asking me as a case manager to work with young offenders and also to work with their parents.
Can you give us an example?
So you get a young person who has gone to court and they've either pleaded guilty and they've received a conviction for a criminal offence. They are then sentenced to a community order, which means they have to go to a youth offending service. And once they get to the youth offending service, then we have to address the issues that are the underlying causes that's propelled them into offending. Now, the orders can run from anything from 4 months to 3 years. Okay? And initially, you'd find that quite a few of them, for first-time offenders, if they've pleaded guilty, they would get what we call a referral order. And the referral order will can last for up to a year, but they tend to give them at like 4 months, 6 months, a 9-month order, or a 12-month order. What you would find is that that is not enough time to address a lot of the issues, particularly if there are welfare issues that is propelling that young person or heightening their risk of them engaging in offending behaviour. that's when we need to be able to work multi-agency wide. So working alongside children's social services for them to address some of the welfare concerns, because youth offending teams are a criminal justice agency. So they wouldn't, even though they might have social workers in there, the social workers are there to focus on the criminogenic factors, whereas if there's any welfare concerns, we should be working alongside social services for those to be addressed. The issue that we found was that because the thresholds for social care in terms of significant harm are so high, that for that particular age group of like 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they won't necessarily be willing to provide them with a service. And that meant that a lot of the work that we were doing as the youth offending service was the work of children's social care, and not necessarily being able to actually provide the interventions to address some of the criminal behaviours. So when I say that it's not allowing us that time to prioritise what needs to be done, they want outcomes. They want to see that there's a reduction in that person's offending. Now, if you haven't addressed the issues, that's the underlying causes to their offending behaviour, then you've not made them any better from when they first came through the door.
Which is what I always wonder about. Why is there a continuous vicious circle, root causes?
Yes.
So, okay, continue.
So if you think about it, a young person, first time convicted, comes to the office, they have to tell their story about what's happened, what's brought them there, give you information about their personal, social and family history and their educational history. You do a lot of digging by contacting schools, speaking to parents, interviewing parents, or doing assessments with the parents. They don't know you. You've got an hour to get that information, sometimes 2 hours. They don't know. It's the first time that they've met you. You're expecting a young person to instill trust in you and divulge exactly what's happening for them.
Even an adult, even me.
Even the parents don't give you that information.
Yeah.
They will downplay their children's behaviour. They will make excuses for their children's behaviour, and sometimes they're warranted and they're justified in this. So it's not always that they're condoning a child's behaviour. They have looked at it and they understand why their child is offending. Some parents do collude with their children, but then that's because you have to look at the family as a whole. There might be that you've gone into a family home, the young person's offending because there isn't enough money in that household. Mum might not be happy about it, but it's putting food on the table. You know, the bills are getting paid. Absolutely. But until we can work with families to get to the root cause of those things, we're never ever going to be able to support them efficiently. All we're doing is putting a plaster on it, sending them out there, and just wait for the door to open again, because those kids will, and those families will be back again, because they haven't, their situation hasn't changed. We haven't made the quality of their life any better. So for me, what I used to do was, rather than follow what they call was the national standards in terms of what we needed to do with the young people, I did free flow. And free flow is, I would say to the young person, this is where you're at. You're now with this service. I want you to reflect on what you think has brought you here to this position, and then I want you to identify the 3 areas in your life that you think are problematic. They list it. Now those 3 things that they list may not be anything to do with what's brought them there. You know, they might not even be able to see a direct link. But the fact of the matter is that they've identified 3 things that is problematic for them. I've got their trust. Yeah? I'm showing them that I've got integrity, because they're leading the session, they're leading the intervention, and they will tell me in what order they're going to prioritise the work on those 3 things. I haven't identified them, they have. So they're more willing and more likely to engage in that programme. Once you've done that, you usually find, because they've identified those 3 things, that's got to be the reasons why they're actually being propelled into offending, even if it might not be quite apparent to start off with. But the more you speak to the young person, and the more that they start engaging with you, you can link those 3 priority areas with the behaviours. Any
examples of the kind of thing that is their reality and their mountain?
Their reality in a lot of situations are that people that come from abroad, say. So this isn't the country that they were born in. This is the country where their family have decided that this is where they need to be. So in one local authority, I remember there was a young lady, a young girl, she was about 13 or 14, very well spoken, and her and her family had moved over from Spain. And it was her brother, younger brother, and her mum. And I remember doing the interview to start the assessment with them, and it was as though she was giving me a spiel about the offence that led up to her being convicted and getting arrested. And it was a shoplifting offence. And I knew the girl was being genuine. There was nothing to say to me that she was lying or anything, but she was trying to cover up. I knew she didn't commit this offence because there was a lot of inconsistencies in what she was saying.
Yeah.
And in the interview, I turned round to Mum and I said to Mum, I just asked her, I said, did you steal the items? And Mum broke down and she started crying. It was Mum that was doing the shoplifting. She was doing the shoplifting because there wasn't enough money coming into the household. She separated from the dad. Dad had not been sending any maintenance or anything for the children. It was coming up to Christmas, and what she was actually doing was stealing Christmas presents for the children. So there wasn't anything of major value, but she was still willing to allow her daughter to get the conviction, despite the fact that the daughter has to go through her education, that's going to be on her record. So there was a lot of work that needs to be done around that. So those are some of the things that propel people into offending behaviour. Other issues could be that they are associated to issues around abuse. So it could be that they're being neglected. It might be that in the household that they're living in, they may come from a blended family. So it might be that they're not necessarily living with their biological mother or biological father. They've got a step-parent there, but maybe that relationship between that step-parent and that child is one that means that the child has to spend more time outside the house than they are inside the house. And if they're outside the house and they're not being supervised, that means that they're easy pickings for older and more sophisticated offenders to pick them up and exploit them. So that's the work that I do. Those are the types of approaches that I tried to undertake, and that's why I started Positive Roots, because I wanted to give the young people and also the parents a service that was more tailored to their needs. So for me to say I offer this service and I offer that service, I can only say to you I offer it in a loose sense, because I take my lead by my clients. So if I was to advertise my services, I would only have the only way I could describe them would be to say that I support children, young people, parents and professionals in matters relating to criminal justice and welfare.
It's brilliant, because for me, out of all the people I've met over the years, you have a wealth of experience, but such a wide and complex remit. So there's things that, first of all, I love the name.
Thank you.
You've got, let's break it down, Positive Roots Consultancy. First of all, positive. You're starting from that things are achievable, change is achievable. Roots, you're going to the root, you're going to the core, and you're grasping at the roots, which is the foundation of everything.
Absolutely.
Consultancy, what I love is in how you've just explained, you are consulting the people that we're actually meant to be taking care of. And that trust, which is so hard to gain, which seems to be missing in so much public consultation, you're hearing them. You're asking for their voice.
Because I'm not going in with an agenda. Whereas when you work for the local authority, there's an agenda, there has to be. Otherwise, why else would they be paying the wages?
How do you mean agenda with the local authority?
The agenda is that these issues need to be resolved, they need to be resolved now, and they need to be resolved to the satisfaction of the local authority. That's the agenda. They're not interested in what's going on for the parent. They're not interested in whether the parent has got depression. That means that they're not able to, their parenting capacity may not be at its optimum at the periods of time when they're feeling depressed. They don't recognise that. They want action and they want results and they want it to their satisfaction. So it's their agenda and not the agenda of the families that we're said to be working with. And that's why the consultancy part is important. It's important for me to convey to people that I don't see myself as an expert. I just see myself as a vehicle, as a vessel, or a medium or a means to help people tap into themselves, identify their strengths, identify their strategies, their skills, the knowledge and the know-how that they've already got to hand, and helping them to put it together in a structured way that's going to benefit themselves and their families.
Yeah, it's so important, because I didn't realise the kind of disconnect, because as we were talking about earlier and alluding to, there are, despite the bad press, beyond the major headlines and the sound bites, there are hard-working people in and out of uniform. But then there are those who are, quote unquote, I spoke to someone within the force, rotten to the core, and they will not have them. So the problem, when I'm hearing, this is why you're here and others, you know, we're honoured to share and try and understand. What I do not understand is, these people exist. Why do we? It's not all bad news. You exist. There's others that are existing. People will share this and give their insights. Why is there so much dysfunction? Why is it we're paying? You know, from your perspective, we pay our taxes. There are it's meant to be publicly funded. It's not easy managing millions of people, but you're paid to do it. So you have people like yourselves, you know, what's it called, who can be consulted. So why is it, you know, there's social workers, I keep hearing about, you know, stress, the workload. Why is a disconnect? I still don't understand.
I think I need to dispel one of the myths about social workers.
Please.
Social workers themselves that work for the local authority, powerless.
Powerless?
They are powerless. The social worker who's allocated as a case manager to manage cases, they are powerless. They are not the decision makers. And a lot of the families that we're working with that are presented with social workers or allocated social workers seem to think they aim all of their animosity and their anger towards that particular social worker. But that social worker is powerless. They are not in a position to make decisions. They go out, they gather the information, then they have to go back to their manager. Their manager might not even be at the position where they're able to make a definitive decision about what needs to happen around that particular case or for that particular family. They might have to go through 2 or 3 chains before they get a decision. And this is what people don't know about social workers. They just think, what's the point of having a bloody social worker? They don't do anything, they just come around here and tell. They're not. They're dictated to by the organisation, because this is about, as you said, the public's money. And every time you have like a reorganisation or a restructure, what you're actually doing is you're diluting social work. So social work today is not the social work of what it was 30, 40, even 50 years ago.
In terms of the diligence, the follow-up to avoid emergency?
How it's approached. So before, social workers would be the case workers. They would be the decision makers. They would know where to signpost people to. They would know what work they would need, the direct work that they would need to undertake with their clients. What they have become are brokers. So they sit in their office, they may go out and see clients where they're doing the statutory checks, where the legislation says this child's not subject to a child protection plan, so they need to have announced visits and unannounced visits at set periods of time. They have to have a conference, that conference has to be reviewed, all of those sorts of things. Then it might be that you've got a child that's not subject to a child protection plan, but they might be considered a child in need. So in other words, services need to go in order to support the development of that child. And in those cases, it tends then to be the groups that are around the child. So education, the school will have a part to play within that child in need plan. Parents would have a part to play within the child in need plan. If the child is engaged in community activities within their local community, they may also have a part to play within the child in need plan. But the social worker will only be there to convene the meetings where those professionals come together to say how they've met the targets that's been identified. So that's important for me to be able to explain. And that's why I think we're in the situation that we are in with social workers, and why their hands are sort of tied, because they've been de-skilled.
So they've been de-skilled. So this answers, because, you know, this whole so-called news, I honestly believe news doesn't exist. News is meant to be new. It's a rolling circle, editorial guidelines, different agendas, and we give thanks for, you know, the good and bad of social media and citizen journalism. At least more stories are out there, and, you know, people can do the research for themselves. De-skilling, all we hear in the news this answers. We're always watching the news and there's, you know, a vulnerable child or person, you know, awful news, which isn't news to us, you know, what's it called? Poverty.
Yeah.
Someone found dead in their home. The teachers went there because the child wasn't in school, starved to death.
Yeah.
Knife crime. What's it called? All of these, you know, vulnerable kids, sexual exploitation, vulnerable children, sexual traffic. So if they're powerless, but yet they're still the scapegoats. So in your mind, are you offering a counterbalance, or what more needs to be done?
I think we need to take time. And when I say take time, I mean we need to be self-reflective. So when I'm going in and I'm doing an assessment, naturally, I'm nosy. Okay, naturally, and I know that about myself. In the work that I'm doing, do I need to know everything about the person that I'm working with? The answer is no. I only need to know the information that's going to support me, to support them, to reach their objective. So whenever before I even ask a question, I ask myself, Sam, what is the relevance of you having this answer? How is that going to change things or inform the work that you're doing with this particular individual or this family? If I can't answer that, I don't ask it.
Focus.
Absolutely. So it is about being focused, but it's also, as I said, like I said, it's about not my agenda, it's about their agenda. So it's taking the lead from them. So for me, the best thing that I can do, the best skill that I can bring to this job is active listening. Because people this might be the first time they're bearing their soul. This might be the first time that they're actually confronting the issue that they're about to deal with. And they might be sceptical, they might be unsure of how I'm going to receive that or how I'm going to respond to them. So it's important for me to listen actively, which means indicating to them that I'm hearing what they're saying, but not necessarily interrupting, not asking any questions. And if you are going to ask a question, I don't ask a direct question. I would say to them, well, what would you do, or what would you say to somebody in this situation if this arose? You know, or have you given consideration to what if this happens? So playing devil's advocate, which will mean that they will look at things in a different way, particularly when you've got somebody who's stuck in crisis and all they can see is working or looking at things in one particular way, and that's usually how it impacts on them. You know, so not looking necessarily at how they can get themselves out of that situation, but just saying, woe unto me, I'm in this situation, I can't get out of it. What I call victim mentality. But again, a lot of the statutory services and the way that they've been formulated and the changes that have happened in local authority over time has made people feel that way, made them doubt whether or not they've got the capabilities to resolve their own issues. And Positive Roots is about reinstalling that in the people that we work with.
In your workings, just generally now, and all the amazing services that you're providing, what still surprises you that the main public aren't aware of? And when you're watching the news and you're listening, not even the main public, I'm talking about, and we're not average, by the way, we're all extraordinary heroes. I'm talking about from MPs in a level playing field, from MPs to legislation, policy makers, to the statisticians, to you, to me and others. What are you surprised people don't know?
I'm surprised that people don't recognise in this day and age that they should be adopting self-agency. Don't rely on anybody. Don't rely on the politicians. Don't believe the statistics. First and foremost, don't believe the statistics, because the statistics can be manipulated to inform people of whatever it is that you want to inform them of. You want them to think a certain way, you produce statistics. So statistics, I wouldn't worry so much about them. I'm saying to people that it's about working on themselves. It's about looking at things positively rather than looking at things negatively. It's about recognising that you are the expert of yourself and your family and your children, and not the so-called professionals that are around you. The professionals that are around you are going to vary. You're going to get really, really good ones, you know, and then you're going to get really, really crappy ones. You know what I mean? And those experiences of those types of people that you come across, those professionals that you come across, can also have an impact on your own agency. So this is about teaching people to be reflective, teaching people to have a level of self-awareness and self-belief that they can achieve. I didn't choose this work. The work chose me. I'm doing it because it's what I do. It's not work. It isn't work.
It drives you.
It drives me. It's not work. To me, if I can help somebody improve their life situation or how they think or feel about themselves, then to me, that's not a job. That's just...
It's wonderful. You're your own spirit guide, and you're pushing forward. My thing is, I have to ask you this. It might not even be related to the work you do, and I know that you do have work with what's it called, Criminology, but in terms of gang affiliation.
Yes.
Now, my thing, it's just ongoing. Now, there is the news, and then there's reality. Is it being focused on, and in your idea, is crime higher in terms of youth? And I'm not going to say it's just African Caribbean or Africans at all. There is different crimes beyond skin,
absolutely.
And there's more focus on it. Anyone can see that. There's no agenda here. You can see it. It's just focused on. And so I'm just like wondering, when you're hearing this, like I see the comments. Where are the parents? Why are they doing that? He had this. He had that. There's loads of people. What are your thoughts on that? Any thoughts?
Okay, I don't think that it's necessarily increasing. I think our awareness of the issues that are affecting young people today have heightened. I think also as soon as we get up, we're too delayed in responding to some of these new youth cultures, because that's what it is. Like, you're quite right, it's not about skin colour. This is about youth culture. And also when you look at it on a political level, youth now has extended. So we will classify 25, 26-year-olds as being youths now because of the way society has now been structured. So you can't, before, back in the day, you'd go to school, you'd leave school at 16, you'd either go to college, which would then lead on to university before you got a job, or you'd go out and get an apprenticeship, or you'd go straight into employment. You had options, you had choices. So usually what would normally happen is that by the time you're like 20, 21, 22, you're thinking about leaving home, you're probably even thinking about getting married and setting up and having your own relationship. Things have changed now, a lot. So now youth doesn't stop at 18 or stop at 16, do you know what I mean? Youth carries on 25, 26. You've probably got some big man of 30 odd still living at home because they can't make it forward. And the
problem with that is that this arrested development that exists, and the shame society puts on there.
Absolutely.
Try buying a house.
Absolutely.
Try buying a house.
Absolutely.
There is no shame living at home.
Yeah.
This is what we did. We looked after each other, intergenerational, together, and yet it's been twisted to make that person feel like nothing and invisible. So they'll make their mark.
Absolutely.
Even for me, who doesn't know enough, we've been raised differently. I wasn't raised here, so this insight. So this whole kind of bridge. No youth centres. I remember the play huts in the park. You'd go there, you'd do your nonsense, but off the street.
Absolutely.
Even meet a mix of people.
And they were supervised, they were constructive activities.
It was positive.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just music, by the way. It was like maths lessons in one corner,
physical
tennis,
exercise, all of those sorts
all this
of things.
stuff. So this is what makes me think, if there's all these solutions, my husband, Jay, would actually say the same thing. The reality is, it is not in the interests of some to have solutions, because there's opportunity in crisis and everything. Not everybody. Thankfully, there's people of all skins working hard, like yourselves. Superheroes, unsung heroes. But I'm tired of this one narrative, and it seems I'm just like, what? How can people connect with you so there's more positivity?
What I want, and the reason why I came on today as well, was also because, as I said, I could say what the service is about, but the service is about what the people need. So you've touched a little bit on the gang affiliation and gang side of it. Now, when I started the company 5 years ago, in its first year, I was in Luton talking about child sexual exploitation. And as I said, the company was set up not just to work with individuals or individual children or young people and their parents or carers. It was also about making sure that I could work with professionals. Because if I can change their mindset and the way that they approach the work, that means that those families that are looking for support from the statutory services will at least be getting something different by giving them a different way of looking at it.
Without prejudice.
Absolutely. And I invited all of the family workers from all of the primary schools and the secondary schools in Luton, and I put on a 2-day CSE course. And only one family worker admitted that there was an issue with sexual exploitation. All of the rest of them denied it. 5 years later, 4 years on, it's a massive thing now. They're all running around like headless chickens.
Post-Savile.
Absolutely. Trying to find a way of how to address some of those issues, but not necessarily. But again, it's all reactive because they're not taking time to look at what organisations are already in the local area that have worked with groups or individuals that have experienced that sort of thing and successfully been able to provide them with an intervention. So they're not interested in working with those companies or those organisations that are not under statutory umbrella.
So waste of resources, that means vulnerable fall through the gaps while this ego power play. That's sad to hear. Enough about them. Promote.
Okay.
How can people connect with you? All information will be shared after.
Okay, so I am based in Trend House, which is at the bottom of Dallow Road in Luton. I have an office there, but because I do a range of stuff, a lot of the stuff that I do, I don't expect people to come to the office. The office is just a base for myself, but I will invite people up there if they feel comfortable being in the office environment. A lot of the work that I do with the families is delivered either in their home or in the community, in a place where they feel safe. I work with the children, the young people, and also work with their parents or carers. So with the young people, I've got quite a few young people on my books who are gang affiliated. A lot of them are not Luton based, they're actually coming from different London boroughs.
I was about to ask you areas.
Yeah, that's where the majority of my referrals actually come from, are from London based, either young people or their parents. And also what I will do is I will work with the parent alongside the child, and the parent will be given information that heightens their awareness about some of the current issues, what they need to actually look out for, how they can actually successfully and effectively communicate with their children in a way that's helping them to resolve those issues rather than perpetuating them further into the gang lifestyle. Because sometimes when we're getting those kids that are like teenagers, what makes it difficult is that they're at that stage of their development where they're forming their identity. Family values, for us as parents, we probably think they've forgotten them or they've pushed them to one side. They haven't forgotten them, and that's one of the things that the parents seem to forget. They seem to think that because they're trying to form their own identity, and because they're looking at what their friends are doing and trying to adopt their friends' values, that they've forgotten the values that the families instilled in, but they haven't. What you need to do is allow the child the space and the opportunity to fall on their backside in a certain situation, because that's when you will see their resilience. And what resilience have they got? What tools have they got? Their family values. That's what they'll be drawing on in order to get themselves out of that particular situation. But we have to give them opportunities to put that into practice, and we've got to make sure that it's unobtrusive opportunities, because you know what young people are like when they think that they're an adult and they think that they've grasped that level of responsibility. If we're not careful at how we guide them, because this is where it's key, that it's important to not confuse the discipline that I'm talking about, because I will use the term discipline and people seem to think I mean corporal punishment or
take you back to the village.
But it's not punishment. When I'm talking about discipline at that age, I'm talking about guidance, and it's about guiding them appropriately. So with young people at that age, they don't want to be told what to do, but if you give them options, and you tell them they've got a choice, they're more likely to make the right decision.
Very true. And please share how can people connect with you and the website.
So the website is it's still up at the moment, but I'm getting it redone professionally 5 years in. And it's www.positiverootsconsultancy.co.uk. You can contact me on my mobile 075 911 65870. Phone is always on. And I've got an office number which is 01582 488 675. There's an answer machine there which is always checked because, as I said, I'm out and about quite a lot. If you do call the office, leave a message and I'll definitely get back to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a good insight to know. Please share this video and the others. We welcome your comments and thoughts. We always want to learn from you. Stay safe, people, and peace, 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 peace.